Peace, Israel, and Yah bless. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. The title of today's lesson is Our Seed, Our Children, the Gift of Life. Once again, this lesson is entitled Our Seed, Our Children, the Gift of Life. Now, many of us have been told, have been taught, and we hear many of our people speak of being born again, being a born again Christian, and all this other stuff. Now, they have failed to understand what being born again really means in an actual practical sense as it relates to the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts. So we're going to cover that. That way, once I'm finished with this lesson, you will have a clear understanding of what your purpose is throughout the generations, and that indeed you are born again, but not in the manner by which the Roman, the Christian, the Catholic has taught us. Once again, brace yourselves, tighten up your jaws. Do not turn to the left or to the right, or you will get hit in the mouth. You are to walk the straight and narrow way of the Most High's commandments. We are not to deviate to the right hand or to the left hand. We are to walk the straight and narrow way. All right, let's begin this lesson at Genesis chapter 1, verse 12. Genesis chapter 1, verse 12. We're going to discuss our seed, our children, and the gift of life. Genesis chapter 1, verse 12 reads, And the earth brought forth grass, and herb, yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And Yah saw that it was good. So the Most High brought forth the trees and the herb. Okay, so all the plants and the trees and the animals, which also includes man, has its own seed in it. It is self-generating, so to speak. So a man's seed are his testicles. That's already within him. The woman's seed is that egg that she produces every month, i.e. her menstrual cycle, the time of women, okay? Those are that reproductive eggs, so those things are already within us. The trees bring forth fruit. That fruit is nothing but in that fruit there is a seed. The seed is in it that produces a replica of itself. This is why our sexual organs are known as our reproductive organs. By way of utilizing these organs is how we produce replica of ourselves. All right, now let's move to Genesis chapter 5, and we will read verse 3. Genesis chapter 5, and we'll read verse 3. And verse 3 of Genesis chapter 5 reads, And Adam lived 130 years, and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. Now, Adam brought forth a son. He had a son after his own likeness. Now, what we have to understand is for you to have a son after your own likeness, that would be important that you are having a relationship with someone who looks like you. When you begin to mingle the holy seed with strangers, then that becomes a problem, because then your seed is unrecognizable to you. It's not in your likeness. And this is something that we must understand. Okay, for your son should look something like you. He is supposed to be your replica. But when you start to lay down in the bed with outlandish women, strange women, alien women, then what you bring forth is not something that is of your likeness. It is something almost unrecognizable. So this is something that we must remember, and that is why we're not to mingle seed. Now, let's move to Genesis. Excuse me, let's go down to Numbers. Numbers chapter 14. We'll read Numbers chapter 14, and we'll read verse 18. Numbers chapter 14, and we'll read verse 18. And verse 18 of Numbers chapter 14 reads, Yah is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity, which is sin, and transgression, which is also sin, and by no means clearing the guilty. In other words, if you're guilty, you will be punished. Visiting the iniquity, the sins of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. So, those of us who are in this generation and those of us who are in generations past, if we are living in sin and we continue to walk contrary to the Most High's laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts, the Most High will punish us three and four generations down the line. So we have to understand that we have to recognize what our faults have been in times past. We're to look at the actions of our forefathers and our parents before us. That way we can make the correction in this generation. As we make that correction in this generation, it removes the curses off of our heads in the next generation. So what happens is we pretty much are improving ourselves, moving closer and closer to the Most High, walking in His laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts by cleaning up ourselves generation after generation. Should we not do this, then what happens is these generational curses moves from one generation to the next, and the Most High will punish generation after generation. So we're not to continue to bear the blows of these generational curses. It's a generational expense. At some point, someone in the generation is going to have to stand up and actually be repairers of the breach, that which has been broken, which is the Most High's laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts. There will be righteous men of Israel, men and women, that will wake up, that will rise up, that will stand in their lot in this generation and others to come, that will adhere to the laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts of the Most High, and will mend that breach that has been broken. And so if you're one that's hearing the words of the Most High right now, you may be that one. You may be that person, that individual that has been chosen, that has been raised up to be a repairer of that breach, that you may be able to recognize your errors and the errors of your forefathers before you, and you may turn with your whole heart and your whole soul towards the Most High, His laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts, and you may teach your child to do the same, that they may also turn, and so therefore they may not see those generational curses that you have seen and your foreparents have endured. Now let's turn to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, and we will read verse 5. Exodus chapter 20, verse 5 reads, Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, Yah, thy strength, am a jealous strong one, visiting the iniquity of the fathers unto the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Now, we clearly understand that them that hate him, or those that hate the Most High, are those that walk in total opposition to his laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts. To love the Most High is to be in obedience to his word. And so no one can claim that they love God and love the Creator, and they do not walk after the instructions that he has issued out to us via his prophets. So if we continue to walk in opposition to the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts, then he will continue to plague us and punish us to the third and fourth generation. And if that third and fourth generation continues to walk contrary to those laws, then it will be lengthened once again. And most of you who have been at the channel and are in this book of remembrance, you know clearly that the Most High said that he will punish us 7 times more. So it will only multiply should we continue to turn our backs away from the Most High and do that which we want to do rather than that which we were instructed to do. Let's move over to Exodus chapter 34, and we'll read verse 7. Exodus chapter 34 and verse 7 reads, "Keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers unto the children, and upon the children's children, unto the third and to the fourth generation." So the Most High is going to he's keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity to those who will turn back and do that which is right, and transgression and sin, and will by no means clear the guilty. So therefore, if you are guilty, you will pay. Now, if you are guilty and of a contrite spirit, that certainly changes your circumstance. But if you are guilty, hear this word and refuse to hear, then you can stand by for what you're going to get. But the Most High is making it plain that he will take this thing through the generation to your children and to your children's children. And if they do not turn, then it continues on down the line. Now, we have read that in 3 places. That is to reiterate one thing. Number 1, we're not to be selfish. We are to understand the importance of our current life, and that the things that we do now certainly affects the next generation. And the things that your father did before you affects your current life right now. So you may be going through some hardships and it's getting stuck to you. You're going through all types of upheaval and hardships. And it may possibly be that what you're experiencing is because of what your father and your mother have done in their lives and what your grandfather did in his life. And I'm going to touch on this later on in this lesson. So you may see some hardships that you cannot explain, and you do not understand why these things are happening to you, and you may feel as though you don't deserve them. But unbeknownst to you, what you're facing is the direct result of what your father have done, or your mother may have done, or your grandfather, or your great-grandfather. And so you're bearing the brunt of the blow for what they have done unbeknownst to you. All right, let's turn to Ezra. Ezra chapter 9, the book of Ezra. We'll read chapter 9. The book of Ezra. Book of Ezra chapter 9, verse 2. All right. And the book of Ezra chapter 9, verse 2 reads, "For they have taken of their daughters for themselves, and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and rulers have been chief in this trespass." So what has happened here in Ezra chapter 9, the leadership of the house of Israel, the men that were important, that made all the decisions, that were leading the people, that were supposed to shepherd the people in the way that they should go, they started marrying strange women, outlandish women, women who were not Israelites. Now, many will argue that this was only specific to the nations that were in the land of Israel that we were given, i.e. the Canaanites, etc. But if you look at the chapter, at the verse above that, it will clearly let you know that this did not just apply to those people that were in the land of Canaan. This applied to Egyptians also. And not only that, it applies to anyone else that's not of the house of Israel. So the verse before that, it's not just those nations that were in the land. You will see the land of Egypt being listed in there also. And Egypt is not in in the landmass, the geographical landmass of the land of Israel that the Israelites were given by the Most High. Okay, so this is when the house of Israel did not separate themselves from the heathen. Now let's go ahead and read verse 1 just for effect. Now when these things were done, the princes came to me, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, plural, doing according to their abominations, even of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. So the men of Israel were walking after these outlandish women, strange women, foreign looking, foreign talking, foreign in their behavior, alien women, strange. The term we use for this behavior nowadays, our men going after outlandish women, women who are strange in their behavior, strange in their speech, strange in their dress, strange in their beliefs, strange in their looks, strange in their actions, strange in their gods. Nowadays, our men have become so foolish, we call them exotic women. There's nothing exotic about them. They are outlandish. That is the correct term used here in the book of Remembrance, because they are strange. Their customs are not anything close to yours. Their appearance are not anything close to yours. Their beliefs also is not close to yours, if you have any anyway. And so when you decide to mingle your seed with these outlandish women, that the product of that marriage, if you will, is something that is unrecognizable, meaning you produce a child that is not of your likeness. Many of you have done this thing, and if you have, you are in error, and you simply have to repent for this. Most of our people that have done this, both males and females, did not know that this thing was a sin, but now you do. So once that has been brought forth to you, you have a choice. You can correct your errors by acknowledging your faults, or you continue to walk in your own sin and die in your own sin and die in your own shame. That is a decision that every individual has to make on his own or on her own. All right, let's turn to Chronicles, to the book of Chronicles, and we'll read chapter 1. First Chronicles chapter 17, excuse me. First Chronicles chapter 17. First Chronicles chapter 17. First Chronicles chapter 17, and we will read verse 22. And verse 22 reads, for thy people Israel did thou make thine own people forever. Let me read that. For thy people Israel did thou make thine own people forever, and thou, Yah, becamest their strength. So the house of Israel, the Most High has made us his own people forever. And he became our strength. He became our strong one. So in times of hardship, we are to lean upon him, for we are his people. And therefore, we are not to be mingled with other people who are not his people. His people, we are to be separate. We are a set apart people. We are a special people above all the nations on the face of the earth. This was strictly instructed to us. And some of our people will actually believe that we're not, that we're all the same and everyone is equal and things of the like. I have lessons that actually will lay out plain out of this book of remembrance that the peoples on the face of the earth, that the families that are upon the face of the earth, we are not the same. Never have been, nor will we ever be. We are entirely different. We're entirely set apart from everyone else. And if we are to be set apart, we cannot be set apart from them and be mingling with them at the same time. So this is where this separation takes place. We must separate ourselves from the heathen, from other people, their ways, their customs, and their laws. All right. Nehemiah. Let's turn to the book of Nehemiah. The book of Nehemiah. And we will read verse 13, chapter 13, verse 26. The book of Nehemiah. The book of Nehemiah, chapter 13, verse 26. And verse 26 reads of Nehemiah chapter 13. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, correct term governor, sin by these things? By what things? By laying down with strange women, outlandish women. Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved by his strong one. And Yah made him king, correct term governor, over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. So when you start dealing with outlandish women, that's what would be termed foreign women, strange women, strange looking, strange acting, strange dressing women. Outlandish, they're foreign. Women you're not accustomed to. Nowadays, they call them, once again, they say that these are exotic women. They're not exotic, they're outlandish. And they're to be left alone. So Solomon made the error of going after these outlandish, strange, foreign talking, foreign acting, foreign believing women. And more than likely, if they're going to act foreign, they're cooking foreign foods, which is going to be unclean for you to eat. And the customs and the things that they do is going to be foreign, unclean. And so Solomon, by being engaged with these women furthered him, led his heart astray, that he started to serve. He built eminent high places onto the idols of his wives. And so once he began to do this, this was a great sin. He should not have been with them in the first place. So this is something to be reiterated, that we're not to be mingled with the heathen, and we're not to be mingled, nor are we to take our seed and pollute it with outlandish women. Let's turn to 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 11. First Kings chapter 11, and we will read verse 9 through verse 13. And verse 9 of 1 Kings chapter 11 reads, And Yah was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned from Yah of Israel, or from the strength of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice. So the Most High had appeared unto Solomon twice, letting him know what he should do and what he should not do. Verse 10, And had commanded him concerning these things, that he should not go after other idols, quote unquote gods, lowercase. But he kept not that which Yah had commanded. So the Most High had commanded Solomon, look, do not go after these idols, after these strange gods. Solomon also knew not to go after outlandish women. He knew this also. Verse 11, Wherefore Yah said unto Solomon, For as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend, tear, take away the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. So I'm going to strip you of your position, since you choose to ignore the commandments and the instructions that I have given you and have given to your father. I'm going to take this kingdom from you. I'm going to tear it away from you, for you are disobedient. Verse 12, Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. His son is Rehoboam. Now, Let me reread that for effect. Verse 12 of 1 Kings chapter 11. Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake. In other words, the Most High is telling Solomon, Solomon, you've messed up. And I'm going to kick you out of this throne. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to remove you from this throne because you have done all the things that I told you specifically not to do. You have disobeyed my word. He said, however, I'm going to spare you that embarrassment right off the top. I'm going to allow you to remain sitting on this throne during your days. I'm not going to strip it from you during your lifetime because of your father's David faithfulness towards me. So for your father's sake, I'm going to allow you to sit on this throne. But your son after you, I will take the kingdom from him. I will remove him from this throne. So because of what David has done, it allowed the Most High to have mercy upon his son, his seed, who is Solomon. So David's action during his lifetime is what allowed the Most High to show some grace, to show some mercy towards his son Solomon. But since Solomon walked contrary to the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts, that mercy was not extended to Solomon's son, who is Rehoboam. The kingdom was taken from Rehoboam. So this is for our men to understand, and this is also for men of the nations who are not of the house of Israel to understand, that your behavior has a direct result of what can happen or what will happen to your seed. That will be your children in the next generation. And I will be touching on that shortly. So the Most High said that he will tear the kingdom from Solomon's son, his son being Rehoboam. So he says, let me read verse 12. Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son, his son being Rehoboam. Verse 13. Howbeit, I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. So the Most High said, you've walked against my word, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this kingdom away from you. However, because of your father, I'm going to allow you to sit on this throne during your lifetime. I'm going to take it from your son. And even though I'm going to take it from him, I'm going to still allow that there be one tribe left for your father's sake. So because of David, the Most High had mercy upon his seed 2 generations removed. One man, the Most High showed mercy to him when he had messed up in 2 generations. Now, I would like our people today, the house of Israel, black people scattered, that's been scattered to the 4 corners, who are not aware that they are the house of Israel, who are not aware that they're serving an idol, a graven image, an abomination before the Most High, who are unaware, do not know how to pray, do not know who they are and what has happened to them in times past. All of your documentation is within the book of remembrance, aka what is known as the Old Testament. I would like our people to understand, and I would like those of the nations who are of a contrite spirit that will turn towards the Most High with their whole heart and their whole soul and do that which is right in his sight. I want you all to understand that the failure of this generation is a direct result of what was done in the previous generation and the generation before it. So if you see debauchery and all manner of wickedness in this generation, it is a direct result of the last generation or the generation before it. And as we have read in 3 different places within the scrolls, that the Most High will punish us to the 3rd and 4th generation. So once we become cognizant of that, then we understand clearly that we are not to be selfish, that we as individuals in this generation, we are to indeed go into the scrolls, read exactly what has happened in times past when we transgressed the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts. We are to look carefully at what those punishments were. And then we are to pretty much do a 180. Do that which is right in the sight of the Most High, that he may have mercy upon us in the next generation and the generation after that. So we are not to be selfish, thinking that I'm going for mine, I'm doing me, and that's just it. So once we remove that selfishness from us and we start seeing the grand picture, the grand scheme of things, then we're much more careful in the things that we say and the things that we do. Now, let's deal with this rebirth and being born again. We're told, you become a born again Christian. Some man take you, dip your head in some water, and all of a sudden you're supposed to come up some changed person. And you are now born again, which is absolute rubbish. Let me reiterate to you for the 1000th time. The sons of Levi, Aaron and his sons, are the priest of the Most High. They are his direct ministers. You will never, and I mean never with a capital N, never ever with a capital E. You will never ever read where a son of Aaron, who are the priest line of the Most High, has ever baptized anyone in the house of Israel. It's never happened. There's never been a baptism in the days of old, and there will never be a baptism in the years to come. This is a Christian myth. This is a lie. So this born again Christian nonsense that you hear, and I'm a New Testament Christian and all this other nonsense, is garbage. Now let me explain to you born again in a everyday common sense approach that you can actually see and understand in practical real life terms. All right. I've stated in videos past that when you look at yourself, if you're a man or a woman, a man, when he looks in the mirror, he's looking at himself. He's looking at his father before him and his great-grandfather and his great-great-great-grandfather. He is all of those men. So when he looks at himself, he's seeing all the men that were before him, because he is nothing but a reproduction or a replica of those that were before him. He's carrying their Y chromosome. It's the same exact man, just in a different generation. And if you're a woman, it's the same thing. When you look into the mirror, what you're seeing your mother, you're seeing your grandmother. That's your great-grandmother, and 10 generations all the way back as far as you can go. You are all of those women. You're looking at them in the face every time you look at yourself. So when we think of being born again, this is what born again means in a common sense scenario that you can actually understand. The most beautiful thing that we have ever been given is the gift of life. If you have a child, your child is a reproduction of you. It is your replica. And if you had a child with someone that looks like you and you have not gone outside of the family, if you're of the house of Israel, you have not chosen an outlandish woman to lay down with, then then your child will have your likeness. If you are a man that went ahead and laid down outside the family, outside the house of Israel, and you lay down with some woman that was outlandish, strange looking, strange acting, strange talking, etc., your son doesn't look like you. He looks like something unrecognizable. He's of mingled seed. Still your son. He still carries your Y chromosome. He is just an unrecognizable version of you. That's all. Now, when you have your child is a rebirth. It's you being born again, literally. For when you have a child, that child is your duplicate. This is where, as an adult, you get to right all the wrongs. For example, if you were treated badly, you will make sure that when you raise your child, you don't treat them in the same manner you were treated. All the things that you would have liked, you tend to give it to your child. All the protections that you may have gotten or did not get, when you have a child, you want to take the things that you got that were good and give it to the child. The things that were bad, you don't want to give it to the child. You want to make sure that you take your child and raise them in the best way possible, because deep down inside you understand that that is you. So the beauty of life is the Most High has granted you a child. That is nothing but an opportunity for you to re-raise yourself. Let me say that again. When you have a child, that child is of your likeness. They have your genetics. You raise them in your house. That is nothing but you being granted the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to re-raise your own self and to correct all the errors that you have seen in your lifetime and put it into your own self. That is your replica. That way, when you're dead and gone, you have left a better version of you here on the earth. You have gone through the Most High's laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts. You understood all the errors that was done in previous generations. And you take responsibility for it, because your father and your grandfather, they're you. So when you start to acknowledge the faults of your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, and the many generations before you, all of those men, when you recognize their faults and you go before the Most High asking forgiveness for what they have done, you're asking forgiveness for what you have done, because you are those men. You are just those men in the current generation. So then you take all of that knowledge that was given unto you, you change your ways. Acknowledge the faults of all the screw-ups that you did in the past generation. So now you're raised up in this new generation. The Most High has poured out His Spirit upon you. You understand where you have erred. And so now you raise your son in the way of the law. So what you've done now, you have created a better you. That way when you're dead and gone, you're not really dead. You're still alive via your seed. Your reproduction is here. However, the Most High will have mercy upon you because you raised up in this generation and corrected your errors. And then you have raised yourself, your son now, in the way of the law. And so He will do the same, raising His son. And this is how you live forever, by means of your children, by the reproduction of you. So you dying and going to heaven is not happening. There's no such thing. You will never read that so-and-so died and he went into heaven with God. You will never read that. What you will read is he died and he was gathered onto his people, or he died and he was gathered onto his fathers, meaning he was buried where all the other men of his generations before him were buried. And after that you hear of that man's lineage, his sons. That's him. It's still him. It's in a different generation. When you look at from David to Solomon to Rehoboam and all the other quote-unquote kings, correct term, governors of Israel, you will read, and he did this in the ways of David his father, or he did not walk in the way of David his father. This is 10 generations down the line. So you have to understand that David, Solomon, same man, different generation. So the Most High said, I will punish you through the generations, which means at any time when he was talking to David, he was telling David, if any of the men of your seed, if you ever mess this thing up, I'm going to uproot you. I'm going to get you out the land. So David clearly understood what the Most High meant by that. So David will always have one of his seed, one of his sons sitting before the Most High, provided that nation is gathered together in the land. So David will always sit before the Most High. It doesn't matter what generation it is still David. It is still that Y chromosome. It is David in a different generation. That is all. It is still him. And this is why the house of Israel is being punished today. And we look around and we wonder, well, why are we being punished? And so you can explain to a man of the house of Israel, well, we're being punished. A lot of this is because of what our forefathers have done. And the average one of us might say, man, I didn't build a golden calf. I didn't do any of these things. Why am I getting punished? Well, you did build a golden calf. You did it in generations past. It was you that did this. And so now you have to acknowledge your faults, clean some things up. And that way, as we do this, and we will raise ourselves, our duplicates, excuse me, as we raise our children up, and we teach them the correct manner by which they should walk. Now the Most High is going to have mercy upon us because we have turned. He's now going to have mercy upon our children because we're teaching them that which is right. And now he's going to have mercy on our children's children because they are raising them up in the way that is right. And thus we are able to prolong our days. And the Most High keeps us upon the face of the earth, generation after generation. Not only will we remain within the earth, we will remain in the earth in a manner that we may be able to prosper. Because there are many of our people who have lived to be 70, 80, and 90 years old. The Most High has kept them around. He has prolonged their days to drag them. He has prolonged their days to punish them, to kill their kids before their sight, to plague and disease them, to make them impoverished, and to make their lives miserable for 70, 80 years. So we have a choice. We can have prolonged days of punishment, or we could have prolonged days of mercy, ever-loving kindness, and tenderness that's being shown to us by the Most High, that where we can actually have blessings that we can count. So, if you are a parent, I want you to understand it's very important how you act in relation to this law and how you carry yourself in relation to this law. Understand when you're dealing with your child, when you speak to them, when you interact with them, you must understand that that child is you. That is just you in the next generation. So therefore, you to arm them with all the necessary information to keep them from experiencing some of the hardships that you have endured or your parents and grandparents have endured. So now we understand clearly this is not just, I'm going for mine and I'm going to do for me, and that's, it's all about me. No. Your actions has a direct result upon your house, i.e. your children and your grandchildren. So once we start understanding that, we tend to care about each other a bit more, because when you look at your child, you have to understand that is the greatest gift that the Most High can give you. He is giving you an opportunity to raise a better you for the next generation. So if you are a adult or a child and you have lost your parent, and I know it may sadden you, it may be a sad thing for you to experience when you think that my father is no longer here, my mother's no longer here, or they both may not be here. I want you to be strengthened in the fact that they are here. They are here. When you look at yourself, you are their genetic replica. You are them. They are you. So you are still here in this generation, and you can make things for a better you in the next generation based on how you deal with your children. So the children are indeed our future. Our children, that's us in the generations to come. So once we become cognizant of how we become born again is when you have a child. There you are. It's you all over again. And you know this instinctively if you have a child by just looking at them. That is you in every way, shape, or form. But now you're armed with this law. So now you can raise yourself up in the way of the Most High's law, especially if you were not raised in the law in the first place. So now you know how to make those corrections. And so therefore, if you are doing that, you are now a repairer of the breach. You are now fixing that which was broken down, that which was torn. That is that covenant. And that way, as we pass on, we will leave our replicas here, our children here, who we have raised in this law. That the Most High now will have mercy towards our children and our children's children, because we raised up in this generation to do that which was right in the sight of the Most High. And I hope that makes sense to anyone that is hearing this lesson. That way you do not get this crazy thinking to believe that you're going to die and you're going up into heaven and all of this other madness, and that you're going to be judged after you die. No, you are being judged every day while you are alive, and so will your children. A dead man cannot feel pain. He cannot be judged. Dead man don't know nothing. Dead man can't feel nothing. A dead man can't do anything. So your judgments are faced when you're alive. And if you are not facing it, then your children will. So let's go ahead and understand the importance of life as it is today, right now. We are to make a change, and we are to convert in order to be healed. That is to convert from wickedness unto righteousness. And once we have taken a hold of that righteousness and we stand up in this generation, we are to take that righteousness and teach it to our seed, to our replica. They are our replacements when we're long gone. They are still here. They are our seed. So if you're a parent, you have the greatest gift of all. You have children. Make sure when you interact with them, when you deal with them, that it's done in a manner that you would want to be treated, for they are you. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Remain anchored in this law. If you are at war with your children and there's no peace between you and them, you find a way to make it so. Get on your knees, face Jerusalem, lift your hand in prayer, make your acknowledgement, atone for the sins that you have done in times past, and ask the Most High to put a spirit upon you that you may mend that which is torn between you and your child. Your child is a replica of you. And if you have beef with them and you have turmoil with them, chances are it's because they're very much like you, or they're very much like how you used to be. So you're to keep all of these things in mind, but they are our future. They are you. When you're dead and gone, they are still going to be here. They're you. They are your representatives. They are your duplicates. They are your replicas. And you have to arm them with information that will make their life smoother going forward in the generations to come. Once again, thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Remain on the path to dwell in, and that is the Most High's laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts. Peace, Israel, and peace to the stranger that will take a hold of the Most High's laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts and do them. Peace, Israel, and Yah bless.